Well, guys, welcome to this chat. Today we're going to talk about famous Venezuelan people in history. Yes, history, your probably most hated subject in the whole school. Yeah, probably. Anyway, I would like you all to introduce yourselves, your name, your age, where did you study, what semester or year are you going in your studies, and what do you like? Have you ever heard about any famous Venezuelan people that isn't named Chavez, please? Very welcome. Go ahead.
Okay, well, I can start. Hi, everybody. My name is Angelica Escobar. I'm 22 years old. I'm studying currently my last trimester in electrical engineering at Simon Bolivar University.
Woo!
Yeah, finally.
Yeah.
And about Venezuelan famous history people, well, we all have heard a lot about, like, the like Simon Bolivar, Francisco de Miranda, and many other, not only but also scientific in the scientific world, that they have made a lot of progress for the world.
All right. Angelica, are you there, by the way?
Yes, yeah, yes.
Oh, then you finish. All right. Who's next? Which one of the gentlemen wants to speak and introduce themselves?
Mm.
Not
Okay,
all of the time, please.
okay, I can go. I can go. I am Samuel Malaver. I study mechanical engineering at UCB, and I am 22 years old. Well, I thought that the chat was going to be about famous Venezuelan people, but in these days, no, I didn't know that was for history. But
Yeah,
it's
well,
okay.
that one
I
that one was with Jesus Padre, actually. The
okay,
other
okay,
one.
but well, I like this topic. It's not bad, and I know some things about Simon Bolivar and his professors Simon Andres Bello and Simon Rodriguez, and well, I think that it's gonna be a good chat.
All right, all right. Who's next?
Okay, I go. My name is Carlos Pereira. I'm 20 years old and studied chemical engineer at the ESB. I am the fifth trimester or quarter, and I don't know a lot about famous Venezuelan history people, but I know the common noun. Like Simon Bolivar, the basic. Knowledge about him and Francisco Miranda, but I don't know a lot about our history.
Hold on a second. You said you are the fifth from five children?
No, no, fifth trimester.
All right. All right, all right. Sorry, I didn't hear properly that. All right, cool. Well, there's only one missing. So, Angel, are you there? Angel, are you alive?
I think it's not.
He died.
It
Well,
could
he warned us.
it could be the megas, you know.
Yeah, he warned us about it. Well, this is sad.
Well, he tried.
Yeah, he tried. Let's give it a credit. Well, let's begin with the most obvious people in Venezuelan history. Probably the most famous guy in the whole history of our country, Simon Bolivar. Who wants to read about Simon Bolivar?
Okay, I can read. Okay. Simon Bolivar. He was born in Caracas in July 24th, 1783, and died in December 17, 1830. He was a military and political leader who played an instrumental role in the establishment of Venezuela, Ecuador, Bolivia, Peru, and Colombia as sovereign states independent of Spanish rule. Following this triumph over the Spanish monarchy, Bolívar participated in the foundation of the first Union of Independent Nations in Latin America, Gran Colombia, of which he was president from 1819 to 1830.
All right, very well. Thanks, Angelica. Well, what do we know about Simon Bolivar? No, he's probably the person we are most informed in the whole history of Venezuela, and that is basically because, well, he has a, well, he's present in every schoolroom. For instance, there's a there's a frame of him in pretty much every school, every institution, every college, everything. There are even streets with his name. But let me ask you something about him. What would you say if I tell you that Bolivar was actually meant, or well, he didn't want to be a fighter against the Spanish Empire? Would you believe it?
Well, according to what we have seen in our like education in primary and elementary school, not because basically they put Simon Bolivar like a hero and a, I don't know, like almost like a god. And at least when we were like kids, now that has changed a little bit. But when we were kids, Simon Bolivar was like a superhero. Like he didn't have any, I don't know, like misperfections. He was like a perfect person. But then when I was growing up, I started to read a little bit more about him, and it's not like they put it in the history books here in Venezuela.
Pretty much. In fact, well, this is a curiosity. Bolivar married with a Spanish nobleman, and
Yeah.
actually, the only thing he wanted to do with his life was pretty much being married and live from his inheritance. Pretty much, that was it. If it wasn't because his wife dies barely a few months later after they got married, he wouldn't have become the independent leader and fighter he actually became. That's a curiosity. Another curiosity is that he was quite shorter and his voice was truly annoying, according to many testimonies of the
His
time.
voice.
Yeah, his voice, because we often believe Bolivar must speak,
Yeah.
like
Yeah,
someone
like
with a great deal of authority, but no, he actually had a quite annoying voice. At least three people in history have written about it. So he must probably have been quite a pain in the ass in the moment.
and what about his physical aspect? You know that Chavez and all that started that he didn't look as they put it in, for example, in this image, like he had more like a, I don't know, he wasn't so like Spanish, like his face. What do you have? What you have read about it?
Well, you there is a testimony that is probably the most reliable testimony we can have in history because it came directly from the guy who was his assistant, Peter O'Leary.
Mm-hmm.
And this guy actually describes Bolivar as a rather short person. He says that Bolivar wasn't actually taller than 1.58 centimeters. He actually was one who said that his voice was rather annoying, that he was too thin, too feminish, quite a female voice more than a man voice. And he was actually, and this is something that he explains quite a good deal about it, he was the resemblance of a Spanish traditional house. He was a Spanish
Okay.
actually. He was white. He had bright eyes. He have light hair. So he was clearly not a traditional. He was not even close to be an Indian. I mean, he was Spanish because his family
Yeah.
was Spanish. So it makes sense. But yes, we have this story and this version of Bolivar that is kind of like he was a god, like you said. And recently we find that this regime, in particular Chavez, Maduro, have been trying to change the way we see this figure, when in fact he was just that. He was just a man. He was Spanish, and the only thing is, well, that he didn't believe he wanted to be ruled by a monarch across the other side of the ocean. That was it. But in true, Bolivar actually was not either a player for democracy. Another curiosity. If you do the math, Bolivar actually ruled 19 years in a row the country in a tyrannic style. By the way, he wasn't exactly a democratic leader. he
Yeah.
he actually never went through an election, for instance. So when you have all those things, when you put all those things together, you start realizing that he was more a general, more a warrior rather than a democratic fighter.
Yes, he was a military leader. He didn't have any aspirations of a democratic system or whatsoever.
Yeah. By the way, guys,
I
Carlos, Samuel, yeah.
I have watched videos where that that showed a version. They put him like he was really barbarian with his soldiers, and he was very a really dictator. No, I don't know if that version is true. I prefer obviously the version that we saw in school. But well, I know that a lot of people talk about this version of Simon Bolivar, who is very like a tyrann, a tirano, and
Tyrant.
well, a tyrant. But well, I prefer the version we saw in the school, and he was a fighter, so maybe he has character. I think.
Yeah, well, the thing is that you have to realize and understand that in the time Bolivar lived, there wasn't any other way of government. I mean, democracy in the way we know it today hasn't been hadn't been invented yet. I mean, it
Yeah.
was
Uh,
uh, I mean, to
okay.
be a tyrannic figure was the only way you could rule, because there was no other way. We must remember that even in the United States, people was considering the fact of allowing George Washington to be president for life, because there was no other way. That's the way that people used to do things. So in the moment, there was not exactly
Yeah,
another option, but we
yeah.
do
He did
have a lot
what he.
of we do have a lot of things that he tried to create. I mean, for instance, the idea of using congresses to promote laws and to approve laws was something that he was was quite a promoter. I mean, he was always trying to, in some way, to provide legal substantials to the actions he was taking. That is certainly a good step coming from him, but yeah, in the praxis, he was a military leader, not an elected one. That is something that we must take into consideration.
Yeah, okay. He did what he have to do.
Yeah, well, exactly. You're not exactly going to try to fight an empire, I mean, by holding peaceful agreements, not exactly,
Exactly.
unless the Spanish one. I mean, that's the truth.
Okay.
I mean, we were
But
a colony and we didn't have any organization also, so it was difficult trying to implement a democratic system if we didn't have any sort of like organization also. So I think it was difficult even if people had the idea, I don't think that was something possible in the moment.
well, let's continue. By the way, guys, if you don't know any word on the that we are using here,
Hello?
or that way,
Hello.
Yeah.
hello. What about Carlos?
Okay. Okay.
So
Sorry. What?
if you don't know any word about that we're reading here in the presentation that we're talking about, if you have any doubt, Guys, please ask. This is the point of that is the point of the chat. So let's move on. Carlos, would you like to read about Miranda?
Okay. Francisco de Miranda. He was born in Caracas in March 28, 1750, and died in Spain in 1816. He was a revolutionary military leader. He is regarded as a forerunner of Simon Bolivar, who during the Spanish-American Wars of Independence successfully liberated a vast portion of South America. He developed a visionary plan to liberate and unify all of Spanish America, but his own military initiative on behalf of an independent Spanish America ended in 1812. He was handed over to his enemies, and 4 years later, in 1816, he died in a Spanish prison.
All right. So
La
this is
Carraca.
probably one of the most tragic figures we would
Yeah.
ever had in the story of Venezuela. I mean, Francisco de Miranda was actually something that is not mentioned here, by the way, was not only a revolutionary leader here in Latin America, he participated of the United States American Revolution, and he participated as well of the French Revolution. In both revolutions, he was a general, and he was a main protagonist in the facts that took place over those situations on those countries. He was highly regarded internationally, by the way. He was rewarded, and in some cases, he was even given titles of nobility in some countries that he visited. But the thing is that Francisco de Miranda, when came to his own country, had always a troubled situation. He was never quite, let's say, he was never the favorite one from the criollos, the local oligarchy we used to have here in Venezuela. They were the guys who had the money, who had the lands, who have all the true political power, and they wanted to increase that power using the independence. That was the actual point of independence. And well, Miranda did a lot of things for the independence, but they prefer someone of their own class to lead the process, and eventually that person will end up being Bolivar, by the way.
Mariano,
Tell me.
what is the meaning of forerunner?
Forerunner is kind of predecessor, someone who came before you in a
Mm.
process. I mean, Miranda started before Simon Bolivar in the independent process, so he's a forerunner of Simon Bolivar. He came before.
One question. They were all together in all the wars of independence.
They were together during the first stage. There was a moment from 1812 to 18 no from 1810 to 1812, where Miranda was the de facto leader of the process. He was the main general. He was called the generalissimo. He was also the dictator of Venezuela, and therefore he was the main figure of the process. On those moments, Bolivar was part of his command staff. Bolivar was a colonel back then. He was in command of a group of forces in Venezuela. So Bolivar was actually answering to Miranda during that period of time. They worked together, but it was Bolivar, along many other persons and many other figures in the political process, that hand over Miranda to the Spanish ones. I mean, they betray Miranda actually, and they deliver it to the Spanish so they could get rid of him.
Okay.
And do you know if he, I don't know, I don't remember if he came from like Simon Bolivar from a wealthy family, or he was like a more, I don't
Well,
know.
Francisco de Miranda was not. I mean, there are two types of wealthy. There is wealthy like Simon Bolivar, who basically had the what would be today kind of like $600 million approximation. It's a lot of money. Bolivar, yeah, this is something that is actually quite well documented. Bolivar had inherited not one but four fortunes from his grandfathers, from his mother, from his father, And the truth is, Bolivar had a lot of money. He was the wealthiest person in Venezuela, certainly one of the wealthiest in Latin America. So Bolivar had a lot of money to do what he wanted. Miranda came from a relatively wealthy family, but not as wealthy as Bolivar.
Okay.
The family Miranda came from was a family of Blancos de Costa. He was basically a family who came to Venezuela way after the conquer had ended, and they were here what you would call our merchandisers. They were selling a lot of things. They had a lot of trading and commerce institutions and companies. They were basically devoted to that activity, and Miranda's father was a commander of the local militia here in Venezuela. So he did had a lot. He did had money, I mean, and he certainly lived a comfortable life because he had a lot of titles, he had a lot of positions, he had a lot of military records, but he never was fully wealthy, and he never was as powerfully able to
Yeah,
use
not to the
money
level
as.
of Simon Bolivar, but he came from a relative wealthy family.
Yeah, in fact, this is a curiosity. In back in that time, to be a captain of the Royal Guard, you needed to pay an amount of money, which was like 20,000 pesos. That is
Okay.
pretty much the equivalent to what would it be today, kind of like 4,000, $400,000, $500,000 almost. And
Wow.
Miranda
Damn.
actually paid that amount of money to become captain, so he did have money
Yeah,
to
that was the reason why the Spanish uh, empire was still rich for all the money they received from colonies and
yeah.
fires.
Indeed, indeed. Well, following with the next one, we have Antonio Jose de Sucre. So, Samuel, you got this one. Samuel?
Okay,
All
Antonio
right.
José de Sucre. He was born in February 3rd, 1795 in Cumaná and died in June 4th, 1830. He is known as the Gran Mariscal de Ayacucho. He was an independence leader. Sucre was one of Simón Bolívar's closest friends, general and statesman. A state of Venezuela, a department of Colombia, and a city in Bolivia have been named after him.
And he was also Bolivia's first president, by the way.
Yes.
Yep.
He is regarded as one of the greatest military minds we have ever had in our history. He holds the title of Gran Mariscal de Ayacucho because he won the Battle of Ayacucho, which was a crucial battle to dismantle the remainings of the Spanish Grand Army here in not in Venezuela, in Latin America in general. And he was the one who made that victory possible. He was also one of Bolivar's closest friends. In fact, if you ever read a letter between these two guys, you will have strong doubts about if they were friends or lovers. Believe me.
Really.
Really, I do have read it, and they are in certainly close in levels that you cannot even imagine.
I'm going to look at for it and see. Mm,
So, any questions or doubts about this guy or the text here in the presentation?
No.
no.
Cool. Let's go with
Well, I
Simon
think
Rodriguez.
it was very sad the form he died.
Oh,
I
yeah, you
yeah,
remember.
he died very
Yeah, he
in a
was
very sad
murdered.
way. I don't like it, that part, but well, that was word, so yeah, that's it.
He died in a
Yeah,
war.
he died. Well, there was a war going on. We watched, which is the Independence War. I mean,
In
but
a
the
battle,
thing
sorry.
is, yeah, but the thing is that he was murdered. Not he didn't die in a battle. He died
Okay.
murdered by a group of. It is unknown until this day if they were thieves or they were trained assassins. But the truth is that
Exactly.
he died in his way to Bolivia, and he was probably, there are some speculations that there are some political enemies sent those guys to kill him because many people, including Bolivar himself, saw him as the successor of Bolivar's. I mean, if Bolivar was ever to retire or
Yeah.
die, many
Yeah, so he
people
was a threat.
believe believe he was going to take command. So there was a lot of people who didn't like that idea, and he made a lot of enemies during his career. So yeah, it's an speculation that has survived through history to our days.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I have the curiosity and I look for a letter to Simon Bolivar, and yeah, there is a lot of like a lot of love between them. I don't know. I don't know
You
if
good?
maybe I don't know if maybe it's the way that in the past they wrote in that way, but today it would be a little bit weird if you write to a friend in that way. But I don't know if it's the type of writing in that moment of history. But yes, it's a little bit weird.
Well, actually, in those moments of history, formality used to be the main rule to write. So that is only contribute more to the suspicions we all have. But in any case, we can just say that at the very least they were the first historical romance we ever have recorded in our history. At the very least.
But the first Venezuelan romance.
Anyway, let's go to C. Simon Rodriguez. Who wants to read Simon Rodriguez?
Okay, I read. He was born in Caracas in October 28, 1769, and died in Amotape, Peru, in February 28, 1854. He was known during his exile. What? Okay, I think it's
Carlos, are you okay?
Yes.
okay. He was known during his exile from Spanish America as Samuel Robinson. He was a philosopher and educator, notably Simon Bolivar's tutor and mentor.
And the main reason why he is regarded in history.
Yes.
Otherwise, he will probably have been forgotten. That's the truth.
I mean, besides being Simon Bolivar, like tutor, he had any participation in like the War of Independence or just that?
Well, not directly. He was sent with Bolivar to a couple of diplomatic missions, but
Okay.
nothing more than that. Actually, he was not quite active on the matter of politics. He notably stay away from it. Actually, he liked a lot to read about it, but never to participate. So, nope. Beside that, not much to tell.
Well, he's very famous thanks to Simon Bolivar, so
Yeah,
good
well,
for
he
him.
did a he did a good he did a hell of a job trying to throne
Yeah.
Bolivar. I mean, you must acknowledge that regardless the fact that Bolivar was a short, annoying, and probably tedious person, well, he managed to get to build the country. I mean, that is not easy.
Yeah, well, he deserves the fame.
Well, Carlos, you are going to read about Juan Germán Roth.
Okay. Juan Germán Rocio. He was born in Caracas in May 27, 1763 and died in March 10, 1821 in Colombia. He was a lawyer and politician of Italian background. He served as the Secretary of Foreign Affairs for the Junta of Caracas and was the main editor of the Venezuelan Declaration of Independence. Rocio was also the chief architect of the Venezuelan Constitution of 1811.
All right. So let me ask you something, guys. Have you ever heard about the guy who wrote the American Declaration of Independence?
No, anything.
Honestly, no. I
Well,
Mm-mm,
that is
no.
sad. Truly sad. You should search about that guy. His name was Thomas Jefferson. He was really famous back on those days. And this guy is or Thomas Jefferson. He wrote our
Okay.
Declaration of Independence, and basically he was a long-time serving politician. He was one of the very first members who was part of the junta. A junta is basically a board of presidencies. It's like having a directive board instead of a president. Yeah,
Okay.
Okay.
like that. And he was basically also the one guy who managed to wrote most of the first constitution Venezuela had. So yeah, he's pretty much a respectable guy. Let's see, Jose Felix Reyes. All right, Samuel, this is yours.
Okay. Jose Felix Rivas. He was born in Caracas in September 19th, 1775, and died in Tucupido, January 21st, 1815. He was an independence leader and hero of the Venezuelan War of Independence.
All right. So this guy basically was one general more that played a big role in the independence. He's famous because the Day of Youth was the day on which a group of soldiers, young soldiers, by the way, were led by him to defend Caracas. That is what we celebrate in February 12th. That's it.
Yep.
Jose Antonio Páez. Who wants to read about Páez?
Well, I think we are only four of us, so I believe it's my turn.
Yeah,
He
we're
was
rotating the thing.
he was born in Portuguesa in June 13th, in 1719, and died in New York City in 1873. He was a leader who fought against the Spanish crown under Simón Bolívar during the Venezuelan War of Independence. He later led Venezuela's breakaway from Gran Colombia. He dominated the country's politics for most of the next 2 decades as his president once he was independent of the Gran Colombia. I remember when I read, sorry, about Jose Antonio Paz, I was always like mad with him because it's like, come on, we all fight to like establish Gran Colombia and then you are going to like help to disorganize everything. I didn't like him a lot.
Well, Hugo Chavez will share that opinion, actually. He publicly dismissed him a lot.
Okay, I didn't like that, but I mean, it's like if you see later history in Venezuela, like it's one revolution to the next revolution is like if we at least try to maintain organized government, maybe our history wouldn't be as chaotic as it was, maybe. So I mean, I don't know, he wasn't the only person who leader this breakaway, but he was like the leader. So for that, I didn't like him.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
with the Gran Colombia, we could be, I think we could be one of the first economies in the world with Colombia, Venezuela, and Ecuador. I think that that was a great idea. I share your opinion. I don't like Jose Antonio Paz.
We are all Jose Antonio Páez haters.
what
Exactly.
about you, Carlos? You hate also Jose Antonio Páez?
I don't know a lot about him, so I can't say any opinion.
Well,
He has a diplomatic opinion. I can give
yeah. It's a quite diplomatic way to say, yeah, I'm going to agree with the majority here. The truth is, well, Jose Antonio Páez, actually, I often see Jose Antonio Páez more like a victim of history rather than a figure to be reckoned with. Let me explain you why. The truth is, Jose Antonio Páez was actually quite close to Simón Bolívar. Ironies of the world, he was the one who had to break with the project Bolívar had built, which was the Gran Colombia. The reason for this breaking, nevertheless, was not entirely Jose Antonio Páez's responsibility. There was a lot of people trying to break the Gran Colombia, including Juan José Flores, who was then the governor of Ecuador. He will become later president of Ecuador after the Gran Colombia had fallen, and Francisco Santander, who was the governor of Colombia, who will later become president of Colombia after the Gran Colombia was dismantled. There were a lot of people trying to break the Gran Colombia, and Paez ended up being caught in the middle between a battle in the middle of a battle between the local predominant class in Venezuela and Bolivar, who wanted to hold up together the Gran Colombia. Actually, Jose Antonio Paez tried to negotiate in many ways between the two parts, but in the end, he had to side with one. And given the situation, he chose to side with the locals. So that's the reason why we are Venezuelan and not La Gran Colombia, pretty much.
Okay, well,
Nice.
The
maybe
truth,
he didn't have the fault, but I mean, in general, it's sad that we fought to be a more united, I don't know, nation, and at the end, it
yeah,
didn't work out.
yeah, but the truth is that he does have some fault for what it came after. I mean, he was the one who started the tradition of these great figure leaders who have a
Exactly.
lot of power in military sense that take over the government and eventually hold the nation for a period of 12, 20 years because they are the tyrants and they hold the power through military bases. So that part, it is his fault. That part,
Okay.
yeah, that is his fault. Let's talk about Cristobal Mendoza. Have you ever heard about this guy before, by the way?
No, I think we are a little bit ignorant about Venezuelan history.
Well, this guy was actually the first president Venezuela ever had, even before
Yeah, I
Maduro.
remember. Yeah, yeah, I just remember. Yes.
Well, Samuel, you go with this.
Okay, Cristobal Mendoza. He was born in Trujillo in June 23, 1772, and died in Caracas in February 8, 1899. He was a politician. Cristobal became the first official president of Venezuela, as, as he was the first head of the First Republic of Venezuela from 1811 to 1812.
Well, since he died even before the Gran Colombia fall, as you can understand, he didn't do anything else, basically.
Well,
Agustin Codazzi. Well, Carlos, this is yours.
Okay. Agustin Codazzi. He was born in Italy, 12th, 1793, and died in February 7, 1859. He was a military scientist, geographer, cartographer, and governor of Barinas, 1846-1847. He made his main investigations and cartographic work in Venezuela and Colombia, thoroughly creating for both countries a complete set of maps and statistics after the tumultuous post-independence years from the Spanish Empire.
So let's give him credit to the guy. The guy actually tried to do something scientifically respectable after the country was destroyed because of the independence. That is half vision, believe me.
Yes. And it's sad that we didn't know so much about him. I mean, he really tried something important. I mean, if you think as a country in the level of organization, this is one of the basic things. I mean, having a like a map or some or boundaries well defined. So he tried to work on that. So that's important.
Yep, and he also made a lot of contributions to the part of the populations that were settled within Venezuela. He was the first one who actually realized that we had a problem that was that we didn't have urban centers. We only had Caracas, and Caracas was a little town back then. So, yep, the guy was actually looking ahead of his time. Sadly,
Yeah.
he didn't get as much credit as some other people, truth be told.
Yeah, probably
Well,
because in our history, the most famous peoples are the ones who started a revolution, did
yeah,
some, I don't know.
We have a problem with that actually.
Yeah, because if you see here, I include myself these kind of characters. We didn't know so much because I don't remember in school so many like investigation about these characters. Were mainly about Jose Antonio Páez, all these presidents that came from. I forgot how you say golpe de estado. From revolutions. So it's sad that we don't give them the importance that they have.
Yeah, true. For instance, we have a figure that I always like a lot, which is Humberto Fernandez Moran. He was the founder of the EVIC, and he also created a special history which is made from crystal and is using high level operations. This guy was nearly close to won a Nobel Prize, and he was Venezuelan.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
And
Yeah, we have
then,
a problem.
well, there's Jacinto Comet also. Jacinto Comet is another quite interesting figure. But in any case, let's continue. The only lady in the list, Luisa Cáceres de Arismendi.
Okay, she was born in Caracas on September 25th, 1799, and died on June 28th, 1866. She's one of the most distinguished and how do you say that? Sorry, heroine,
Heroine.
heroine. Okay, on the epic of independence of Venezuela female characters. She was the wife of General Juan Bautista Arizmendi, who bore bore 12 children.
Yeah.
Okay.
She gave birth a lot of people.
Oh my God.
And she also, unlike some other women on his time, she also get his hands within inside the independence process. She was even capable of, well, defending his husband. She took command of the soldiers of his husband had when his husband was arrested. So you can imagine that this was quite a respectable figure back then.
And she had a strong character because she spent a lot of time as a prisoner in the in the castle of Santa Rosa in Margarita for
Yep.
for what for what she did. So and she survived to that. So she was a strong woman.
Yep. You do have to recognize that. Well, guys, these presentations Hava is making are often related with something grammar. Actually, in this case, it's present continuous, mainly because the presentation is about history, and therefore we are using about a lot the terms of ing form. But well, I would like to ask first before I start speaking about this. Everyone here knows what is a present continuous.
Yes.
Yeah, I know this is pretty much CVA level 1. But in any case, the present continuous is the construction we use to express that something is going on while we speak. So right now we are pretty much speaking about the famous people in Venezuela's history. That is an example. I'm not going to go deeper in this because I know that pretty much you all know this. So whatever, let's get the hell to the activity. In couples, you have to create sentences using the present continuous. This is impossibly annoying and dumb. I can't believe it.
Come on, Mariano. Give it a try.
I mean, this is god. Anyway, just give me an example of a present continuous tense, and that
Okay.
would be it.
I'm watching the presentation about famous Venezuelan history people.
You see, Ava, it's quite easy what you're asking. This is pointless. Continue.
Samuel, give us an example.
Yeah, an
Come on,
example.
Carlos, Samuel.
I'm reading a book about famous Venezuela history people.
Okay, I'm
Good.
seeing here being sorry.
Continue. Go. keep going.
Okay, I'm sitting here hearing the chat.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Congratulations, you all know how to use an ing form. God. Any case, well, guys, let me explain you before we finish. Let me start closing this presentation. All right, you will be receiving a form coming from me in your emails. That form basically will ask you a couple of questions about what we saw today, and that would be it. I'm giving you 72 hours to fulfill the form, and after that, I will send to AVAA the list of today's participants with your answers, and that would be it. So that's pretty much it. If you want to keep doing chats these hours every Saturday at 8 p.m., you can stay in the group I create because I'm the one who's giving the chats at Saturday at 8 p.m. always. Yeah, from here
Okay,
to
so
Saturday.
if you have like if you don't have the all the people, we can join the chat club even if we don't didn't confirm.
Yep, exactly. And keep
Oh,
Okay.
the
nice.
if
Okay.
you're going out of the group of the chats I create, at least keep the shareable link. I can give it to you so you can get in when you want, and that would be it.
Okay, awesome.
Fine.
Okay, nice.
Well, good night, guys. Thank you
Bye.
for coming.
Bye.
Have a nice
Okay, see
weekend.
you guys. Take care.